heroin smugglers. Oh, good. They missed that not being organized. And went all over the place. And then when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office to get involved in drug prevention, I suddenly had a job that paid me a huge amount of money that I could never get fired, and I was really good at, and I loved to quit my job before I could retire to do drug prevention full time. How many of you think this is a wise financial move? It's a terrible, terrible idea. So I spent the first couple of years just panicked trying to get work around the country to do drug prevention. And my intention was to spend most of my time with kids and getting adults to get their acts together. Because a lot of times I'll get a call. I remember getting a call from Fort Myers, Florida one time. And the typical call goes like this: Monte, will you come to Fort Myers and talk to our kids? Oh, okay, yeah. What do you want me to accomplish? Kind of silent, because you know what they're thinking. A lot of them are thinking check mark. Come talk to our kids. Let's do a school assembly. So what are you trying to accomplish? The answer was sort of, we'd like you to come here and fix our kids. Okay, that's usually what I get. I asked them, if I come, a little bald-headed guy from Idaho comes to your high school and talks to your kids for an hour, will that fix them? That's silence. You really want to fix them? Yeah. Then we got to do more than do an hour assembly. What we need to do is I need to talk to your adults, I need to talk to your community stakeholders, I need to talk to the people that are writing budgets, policies, laws, I need to talk to all of these people. And before the conversation's done, usually my day looks like school, another school, or breakfast, community stakeholders, 12 sectors, all in one room, mayor, county commissioner, sheriff, all the people. And I tell them that their kids are not getting fixed by me coming to talk to them for now. The kids will never be fixed unless the adults get their acts together. And we talk a lot about why things are the way they are and the solutions are not pretending like the teenagers are the problem. Solutions are adult solutions, adult problems, and with teenager help in reaching their peers. In other words, engaging teenagers, kids, to message, to think of ideas on how to help their peers. So typical day goes, community stakeholders, blah, blah, school, Kiwanis Club, juvenile detention, or even a prison, a juvenile prison kind of a thing, detention center. And usually a church at night, because how many of you have organized school Thursday night school activities for parents, education night for parents on a Thursday evening? Although you might have lots, but how many of you have done months of work and you get 3 parents there? Right? I've been to a talk in Boise. There were 5 speakers and 4 parents. Not a very good use of time. So when somebody calls me and says, if you really want to get people here, get people, adults, find a big church. Find a big church that has a big congregation. Their pastor says, hey, I need you there Wednesday night. Let's invite the community. You'll get way more people there. So something like that. Figure out how to reach more adults instead of just, Thursday night at the school. So that's the way those conversations are. I said, if you're going to bring me all the way back there, use me up. I don't care if I have to mow your lawn. Use my time. Well, so anyway, that's kind of the normal thing. But the minute I got into this, I guess I was naive. I thought I'm going to do all the stuff with kids. But at that point, the kids didn't believe us anymore. But the whole drug legalization, they weren't believing anything adults told them. You go from this is a bad drug, don't do it, it hurts you, to yay, this is the way to make money. This is the way, this is medicine, this is recreation. You lose all credibility. The governor on down, the president on down said, this not only doesn't hurt you, it helps you. You simultaneously teach children that tobacco smoke kills, but marijuana smoke heals. And they are completely confused. So we've lost credibility. So the adults have to get their acts together. So anyway, I'm doing this, and then I realized the legalization thing's changing everything about drug prevention. And I got into the anti-legalization thing because I'm a lawyer and I'm law enforcement. I understood that part. I understood the impact on education, what it's doing to kids. I spent a decade doing nothing but that. My brain's full of probably the most useless information because a lot of people don't care or don't have time to pay attention to the real consequences of what we're doing around the country. So I've been doing that, and I think some success, but we're losing state after state after state, primarily because they're all following the same game plan. The same thing that caused us to lose California, Colorado, all those states, they all follow the same plan. They've all got their listening to people that don't know how to read or music time and time and time. But there's hope, there's ways to fix that. It's getting almost too late. But one of the things we're going to do is talk about how why Idaho is still winning that battle. So anyway, I'm doing these talks, and I think it's going to be really fun and see all these kids and going in and out of airports, fly somewhere, get a talk, fly home, fly somewhere else, give some talks, come home. Late one night, I'm sitting in the airport. The plane's been delayed. It's late. There's nobody around. Sitting in one of those walking sidewalks, a few people go by. And I'm just sitting there tired. And all of a sudden, a little voice in my brain whispered, Stiles, you're a fraud. Whoa, here I was trying to do good things, and my brain was saying, you're a fraud, Stiles. I didn't know what that meant. Kept thinking about it, and it kept coming back to me, Stiles, you're a fraud. And then it dawned on me why my brain was saying that, because I teach adults and kids about bad things, but then I flip it around and talk to them about natural highs and about all the things in the world you can do that's way better than anything the drug culture can offer you. And I show pictures of adventures and wildlife and all of this stuff. And I talk about how their lives can be better if they find natural highs. And a lot of that's in nature, sports, lots of different things. And I figured out what my brain was saying is, in all this running around, I'd stop doing any of that. I'd stop going to the mountains. I'd stop taking pictures. By that time was one of my passions. And I had stopped being the person I told them they should be, like that. I didn't take time for it. And the thing that came to me very strong is, Monte, you are not an authentic person. You are teaching people to do something, to think about, to see things you have stopped paying attention to. And so I vowed from that day, no matter how busy I was going to work into some kind of natural high every single trip. I was going to do something that added a story to what other stories, so that I always had something new, so that I could be an authentic person, a real person, instead of talking about the old me. So now I work in something cool every time. And the thing I worked in for this is a long drive, especially in the snow blizzard over in Pocatello. I stopped at Box Canyon, which is a beautiful place. Hiked all over along the rim. I go down to the canyon, find this beautiful waterfall. I'm taking pictures. All of a sudden, there's nobody there because it's freezing cold. All of a sudden, this couple came up. I started talking to them. And they said, we know you. You're Monte. Hey, at the bottom of a canyon, you're Monte. I'm Lee. Lee is the owl woman in Boise. She knows where a great horned owl nest is. And her and her friends go look at it every day. And they text me about what's going on. Oh, the mom's sitting on the eggs. The baby's hatched. You can't see them very well. Oh, today they're doing this. They're doing this. Oh, dad just brought in a big old jack rabbit. Just all that. So I go down and see all this fun stuff. Lee's one of my CIs, one of my informants about what the owls are doing. And I know her very well. And all of a sudden, she stands at the bottom of the canyon with her husband, Charlie. And we're talking about what a weird circumstances is. We meet there all the way at the bottom of Box Cave. So long story short, I want to take a picture of them in front of the falls. I'm going to take a picture. I got my big camera, I got my phone. And they said, oh, no, why don't you take it with my phone? That phone. So we started to switch phones, and my phone went in the river. I can see it. It's 15 feet down. Can't reach it. I almost thought about jumping in, but I would have died. So anyway, I goes down there. So I go in the window. I go to every farm equipment store, and I try to find something really long that's got a hook on it. And I made this contraption. I thought sure would work. I go back down there. 2 hours later, I cannot snag it. It's still there. Can't get it. So it's still at the bottom of the river. I will never see it again. But because my cell phone got turned off, the computer's not working very well because the iCloud got shut in. So that's what that's all about. Not anything to do with me being disorganized. It's because my phone's at the bottom. Which, so anyway, but that was my adventure on the way. Now my adventure back was to take drone pictures of antelope in the desert. But my drone requires what? My cell phone. So not such a great story. But losing my cell phone and seeing Lee at the bottom of the canyon, it's a story. So anyway, we're gonna talk about a lot of interesting things today. David asked me to talk about pot and fentanyl. They're related. And I want to talk about what it used to be in terms of the opioid problem. And you guys all know this. This is just a real short, simplistic version of what happened. In the old days, we used to get narcotics out of opium poppies. And some of you are too young to remember this, but there used to be fields and fields of opium poppies all over the world. And that's where we got opium, morphine, heroin, pharmaceutical drugs. And the way they did that is to grow hundreds of thousands of acres. And these little pods, once flowers come up, these little pods, they will come and starve them and cut them. And the stuff oozes out of it. And eventually what they'll do is they'll come along and scrape off that ooze and collect the ooze. And that's what has the opium in it. And then they go through lots of ways to take that opium, and they can create opium, but they can create other drugs. And along the way, this opium traffic, then heroin, was everywhere. You had fields everywhere. There was even an opium war over this. Now, the first opium case, not heroin, opium case is the post office seized 12 huge boxes filled with these parrots, ugly parrots sitting on a little bamboo thing. And if you'll see right at the neck, there's a line there. It's because we've got 12 giant boxes of ugly looking parrots was suspicious. So the guys cut into one filled with opium. Every one of it's a huge amount of opium smuggled into Boise, Idaho. Now I'd had lots of heroin cases, but I'd never seen anything like that. You got opium, morphine, heroin. There's all kinds of heroin, white, China white, black tar. The black tar was the most common kind of heroin that I dealt with during my career. It's ugly, ugly stuff. It is very, very impure. It's got a lot of ugly stuff. That's why it's black. And people would take this stuff and add a liquid to it and heat it up and pull it into a syringe and shoot it into their veins. And you can only imagine what that did to people. That was a common thing. And then we started getting pharmaceutical drugs that were starting to be used and abused in the medical system. One of the most famous one was OxyContin. And then we had a whole new problem because people found out that you could get these drugs for pain. They worked very, very well. But you could only get so many of them at a time. So you had heroin dealers, heroin users now using prescriptions. And then you have normal people using prescriptions after a surgery, but we didn't know how dangerous they were at the time. So they would get more and longer than they should. And then guess what happened? They couldn't get enough. So they would go back to the street drugs. And if you haven't seen this movie, a documentary, folks, it with Michael Keaton, you really should watch it because it is a documentary about how the Purdue Pharma Company hooked America on prescription, serious drugs, OxyContin for one. And this was, if you watch the movie, you will see how Purdue Pharma and a guy named Richard Sackler and his family, named Richard, pushed this as a brand new wonder drug that was not addictive. Had no addictive properties. Well, later, the guy at FDA who helped approve that messaging ended up working for Purdue. Very ugly story. But in Appalachia, Ohio, other places, people became rapidly addicted to this stuff. As Purdue continued to promote it as being non-addictive. Michael Keaton plays a doctor who is in Appalachia, coal mining country, who believes it's saving his patients because they're cured of their pain. But then they start needing more and more and more. He takes it, he gets addicted, he becomes horribly addicted to it. And it's a fascinating story. This group all got prosecuted, they lost billions of dollars. But here's the deal. In America, many people still blame prescription drug abuse as the reason we have this huge problem. They still think doctors and pharmaceutical companies are pushing this on people. And that's why all these opioid deaths, they do not understand that that used to be the problem, but today the problem is black market counterfeit pills and other forms of opioids. And they don't recognize that. And that's the problem right now. It's not doctors giving prescriptions for OxyContin, because guess what? If you're really in pain and you need OxyContin, you don't get enough to deal with your pain because there's so many restrictions on this thing. The doctors are taking so much heat and they get sued and the pharma companies get sued. They're really stingy with this stuff now. So you get people in huge amounts of pain, they can't get enough medicine. Guess what happens? Housewives, businesswomen, normal people, they're panicky, they need more, they can't get more, they turn to the black market, and all at the same time, we've got the streets flooded with this, and it comes in several different forms. Now we have these synthetic opioids, and the difference is instead of thousands of acres of plant material that you have to cut the pods, scrape it up, oil, do all these things to create the drug. Can you imagine the amount of time, land, resources necessary to do all of that? Now it's done with chemicals and all that. More and more dangerous. And originally, these synthetic opioids, of course, most of them, like fentanyl, has a medical use. You can get a fentanyl patch after surgery. You can get lots of different things for fentanyl. But what started to happen as these stronger drugs started to be used medically, the drug cartels figure out how to do it clandestinely, and they get in the market in a big way. And guess where most of it was coming from? Anybody want to guess? Most of the fentanyl was coming from the kidney. China, where in China? Wuhan province. That's where most of it came from. It's interesting. That was where fentanyl was coming from. But under pressure by the rest of the world, China made fentanyl production illegal. Although that doesn't usually stop drug traffickers. They can kill you if you break the law, then it's a little bit more incentive. So China decided to stop making fentanyl. Guess what? They shipped the precursor chemicals elsewhere so they could make it. So they're not breaking the law. They're just shipping chemicals that seem innocent by themselves. So now we have places around the world that are mixing these chemicals together to create unprecedented amounts of fentanyl and things way worse. Harborfin, what's the word? Harborfin? Yeah, perfect. Which is, I think it's 100 times more potent than fentanyl and 1,000 times more than bulk morphine. Tiny grain of it kill you. And as a result, we have these, went from China to Mexico largely, and we have these labs, and if you ever watch the video of these labs, you literally have people mixing, and a lot of times they don't have any protection, but other times the sophisticated ones, they have full body hazmat suits on, ventilation, all that. And they take this stuff and they mix it all together, and they have it on a table with a bunch of white powder, which could be some kind of cut, and they put the fentanyl in there and mix it together like this, and then they pour it into a thing that's a pill press, and boom, 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 these pills start coming out that they look exactly like a pharmaceutical pill. So now what we have is a college party where they used to put a bunch of pills in a jar in a thing and grab some, or somebody gives you, oh, this is good for back pain, try this. It's got an unknown quantity of fentanyl. And so it's not the junkies that are dying so much as it is normal folks. They think they're taking something that's not harmful, and it is, or they get it spiked, something gets spiked with it. It doesn't matter if it's killing so many people. Now, to compound that is the border that we're open for business. Think about how much work it takes to grow, harvest, bale large amounts of marijuana to get it across the border. Truckloads, you need truckloads. Today, somebody with a tiny backpack, fanny pack full of fentanyl can bring it across. Stuff that'll kill a whole town. So it's highly concealable, very dangerous. And because the border's not controlled, you got cartels not only smuggling in people, including children, a lot of them to work in marijuana fields. I'll talk about that later. It's flooding our streets. This is my opinion, but it's held by others and based on under screen. But in my opinion, this is the form of chemical warfare. It's like a WMD. It is being poured into our streets to kill people, to addict people, to attack us from the inside, and it's going to get worse. Because with little tweaks to molecules, they can create other chemicals that could be worse or just as bad. And they're going to find new ways to get it in the population. They even have weaponized this. Some of you remember, I can't remember which country it was, but they weaponized, they put one of these things into the air vents and it came out into a big concert and everybody, but some of them died. They had to bring in people, they didn't know what it was, and even first responders came in, got sick because it's in the air. So it can be weaponized too. So let's get to the other point, which is, so the education part of this is a bigger problem now. Because now we're not talking about don't buy that weed and smoke it. Now we're talking about you got to avoid a whole bunch of other things that you don't even know is bad, including pot laced with fentanyl. Every imaginable drug. laced with fentanyl or other things. Because why? Because for the addicts, they get something with fentanyl in it, they'll go, whoa, this is better than the heroin of that body. And they die. And guess what? Most addicts will tell you. If they find out that somebody died in their neighborhood from the guy selling heroin that's, I don't know, orange or whatever, if it's got a particular street name, devil, do whatever it is. Somebody dies, guess what? A typical addict will think in their brains, I want some of that. I want that because I can handle it. I know I'm good, I'm smart. I want something that gets you so high that this dumb guy died because they're always chasing the dragon, they're always chasing something, gets them higher. And then they die. And then I talked to a police officer in Baltimore who Narcaned same person 5 times in one day. As the minute they left, they went back on it 5 times in one day because they can't stop. Fentanyl and other drugs will get you addicted faster to meth, coke, pot, anything. And it's everywhere. So it's not just, you can't just go around saying, don't take fentanyl pills, don't take counterfeit pills. You can't, it's not that way. Everything's dangerous. One thing can kill you. And so our job is made much more difficult. And why do I put up opioids and marijuana? Here's something most people do not know. The legalization of marijuana has fueled the opioid crisis. If people understood this one thing, they would be much less inclined to think, oh, this is a great idea for our state. And here's how that happened. You got cartels out there bringing dope in, growing dope, selling it, very high grade stuff. All of a sudden, state comes in. They vote. The voters say, we want to legalize, we want to sell it, we want to collect taxes, we want to make money. And they legalize, and all of a sudden there's pot shops and there's manufacturing plants and there's all this stuff, and the state's starting to collect money. Well, the pot legalizers, since this all started in 1996 with California, said 2 or 3 things that were complete lies at the beginning, but we didn't know. Well, most people didn't recognize them as a lie. How do they sell this idea to states? If we legalize and regulate it, kids won't be able to get it. Anybody observe that around the country? There's less dope for kids to get when you normalize pot. That's number one. Number 2, it'll destroy the cartels. Well, now you guys smile at, you know, but you know what? Even our own prevention people did not know this at the beginning. They go, it almost sounds reasonable to some. I've been in prevention conferences early on where they bought into those 2 things. Well, yeah, we're going to control and regulate it. And initially, the cartels kind of said, well, this is not good. But then they got the idea, so if the state's going to compete with us for marijuana proceeds, we're going to move to something better, which happened to be opioids, happened to be fentanyl. And it's easier to make, it was easier to smuggle, it was easier to get around, highly addictive, people wanted it. And the shift from cartels from marijuana to opioids was dramatic. We basically told them, you're not going to compete with us, wherever, for pot proceeds, we're going to take all those. So guess what? They turned to that. That just all alone is a major reason for to understand that this whole experiment on human bodies and brains was a horrific, stupid idea. But then it got worse. As pot was normalized in the United States, it was everywhere. They were growing it, they were selling it, it was all over. And if you guys know that medicinal pot, the idea behind that is only people with really serious sicknesses can get it. And I'll show you pictures later. You guys know this stuff, but it's not. It literally, any one of us, you go to California, Colorado, I don't think there's a single person here, including Mario, who could not get a medical card in California. Every single one of you have something, nausea, pain. I got arthritis in your finger. I could say that hurts, chronic pain every day. And I would get a spot. Go to Galloway. So it's everywhere. It's normalized. The demand for it's up. And so the cartels just figured out that they could come back into that market, create it, grow it, sell it, undercut the profits from the dispensaries, sell it at a lower price because they're not taxed or regulated. So they grow it. They don't have to buy land. They don't have to buy water rights. They go up into our national parks, our forests, BLM land. They take our land, confiscate it, grow hundreds of thousands of plants, destroy the environment, create this glut of marijuana that does a couple of things. Number one, it drives the price down for the so-called legal people. 70%, up to 75% of all the pot sold in California is black market pot. And the dispensaries are going out of business. They're saying we can't compete. So what do they start yelling to their legislators about? Lower the taxes, lower the regulation. California, a few years ago, passed a law that authorized $100 million of taxpayer money to prop up the legal pot market because they needed help, they needed subsidies to compete. This is happening in every state, every single state. And yet state after state, Kentucky just legalized pot. One after one after another. So it's a gigantic problem. And now that they've got pot legalized in most states, are going after what's next? Psychedelics, magic mushrooms, LSD, ecstasy, all of that stuff. That's the next wave of medicine that's everywhere. And next it'll be Oregon, all drugs. So if I'm in front of a bunch of policymakers, lawmakers, that's one of the things I argue to say, don't do this. Because you normalize it in your state, you're going to have a state where the drug cartels can hide in plain sight, move their dope around, who's going to know what's legal and illegal. Eventually, these guys are going to be selling it in the back door of dispensaries coming out the front door because it's cheaper pot and it's all going to heck because of that. So to the extent that it comes up in audiences where they should understand that, please feel free to mention that because it is so obvious at this point, it's not debatable. It's that happening. So before we go on to more substantive stuff, I want to give you a legislative update. My friend Mario, who's been a hero of mine for many years, graduated from drug prevention to esteemed legislator. We have to call him Representative Marco. You know, it's a now because he's the only guy I know wears a cowboy hat on the floor of the house. Do you ever do that?
No.
No, I just thought you did maybe. Marco is an amazing ally there. He knows the stuff, and it's good because locked up. Let me a quick update, and I'm going to have Marco correct me if I get any of this wrong. Because I know that these laws and policies are made in state houses, two ways drugs are legalized: legislation and well, there's actually three ways: legislation, voter initiatives, and people just giving up and don't care anymore. But none of the laws are enforced, so it doesn't matter. So this year, because fentanyl is the thing killing everyone, Idaho, like a lot of states, has mandatory minimum sentences for certain levels of drug traffickers. So if you're a meth dealer and you're selling at this level, the judge could or couldn't send you to prison. Maybe not, just depends. If you sell this level, it's more serious. But if you get up to this level, Idaho's mandatory minimum laws say at this level, you are the kind of drug trafficker, you are going to prison. There's no question about it. They're called mandatory minimums. And so at that level, our legislators have decided that we're not going to leave that in the hands of judges anymore, because at 30-year state and federal prosecutor, I can tell you, it doesn't matter how bad a person is, how much dope they sold. When they get the sentencing and they're crying and their mother's on the stand talking about how little Johnny wasn't sucking long enough as a child. He's a good boy otherwise. He's learned his lesson. All bets are off because judges, the judge sentence a guy, Diamond Don, my goodness, his name, president of the local biker gang in Boise, who was suspect in a homicide. Sorry, long story. I was at the homicide scene autopsy. That guy died because he stole the biker's dope. He was the number one suspect, but they couldn't make the case. Well, he wasn't a prosecutor. He later got caught in a wiretap and did. 30 people got arrested, meth dealers. He's one of the main defendants. He goes to trial with his girlfriend. They affectionately refer to her Scary Mary. Even her friends call her Scary Mary. She's a meth addict and not very attractive. And those two went to trial. And this guy claimed that all of the times he's on the wire, talking about selling this and that and money, it was all about motorcycle parts. Big fat lie. Mary's caught smoking, snorting meth in the bathroom during the trial. Dawn and Mary are seen across the street in the park from the courthouse during a break, smoking weed. I said the marshal's over there because they threw it down. I said the marshal's over to pick it up and test it. And they're smoking weed during the trial. And when he's convicted at sentencing, Dawn had 50 letters of recommendation for people in the community. 50 people, glowing reports about what a good person he was, a fine businessman. The letters came from bikers, tattoo parlor owners, mostly the underground economy, not good people. The judge praised him for the support he had in the business community. Murder suspect, big time drug trafficker, uses dope during trial and uses other criminals to say he's a great guy. And this judge barely gave any sentence at all. And he should have gone for 10, 20. So there's good judges out there. A lot of judges, naive, liberal, whatever, people don't go to jail. Mandatory minimums changed all that. Well, guess what? We have mandatory minimums for all drugs, except what? Fentanyl. I've thought about it yet. Wasn't that a big a deal? So legislators this year put together a fentanyl bill to add that to the mandatory minimums. So if you have this much fentanyl, you're going to go to prison for 3, whatever. The higher it goes, the longer. All this would have done is add one drug to the list. And if there was ever any drug that deserved to be on that list, it was this. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics behind it, but everybody I knew thought this would sail through. Who could object? But the committee hearings were a whole bunch of people objected. And the arguments against it mostly, well, what if this? What if this happened? What if this poor soul had this and they didn't know it was fentanyl, or they just made a mistake, or they're in college and it's just all of this 1,000 what ifs. And it died in committee. Didn't get enough support. Now there's some political reasons. Some of that's happening. I'm not going to get into. But at the same moment, I'm testifying in front of the. Remember when I brought up that other bill? The same time.
Extra time, because we made sure to ask some questions. So you got more than 2 minutes.
Both get 2 minutes. I had 13 minutes, I think, for the question.
Like,
Which is an awesome idea. But guess what happened? A lobbyist in a suit from Austin, Texas, a lobbyist from Washington, D.C. showed up to talk about Idaho's laws, to say it was a terrible idea. And I've never seen a room so full of law enforcement people saying, we got to do something. And you know what? At the same time, a legislator is passing around a secret bill that not only doesn't address mandatory minimums for fentanyl, it gets rid of all mandatory minimums. Because there's an undercurrent in the legislature with certain actions of people. They don't want anything mandatory. They'd like to legalize drugs. And you don't know who they are. Marco, most people do that.
I know.
Yeah, me too, but. So there's a secret bill, and I got a copy of it the night before. So while I'm testifying about how important this thing is, I tell them, guess what? There's a bill floating out there to not only not do fentanyl, but to undo all mandatory minimum. And this is the nightmare, and you need to know about it. Short while later, two bills were introduced. It wasn't that particular bill, but it's a version of it. Two bills were filed that would have destroyed mandatory minimums and didn't really create one for fentanyl either. And so that was a nightmare. And there's reasons for that. And then the last few weeks of the legislature, a person who had been one of our stars in fighting legalization filed a bill for medical pot that looks almost exactly like the one being distributed for signatures to get on the ballot. It has some tweaks in it that makes it sound better, but it's really not. And it'll get amended to death if it ever gets on the floor. A legislator did it as a favor to a guy who's a lawyer and a lobbyist in town. Wasn't even the legislator's idea. And he's been kind of an all-star for us. Somebody talked him into funding it. And guess what happened? The news is everywhere. In every national pot publication, everywhere, from the marijuana moment to all of these things are saying, Idaho's got a pot bill. Even though it's going nowhere, it's too late in the session. Everybody's looking at Idaho now thinking, they're vulnerable. They're the target because of this one legislator got talked into doing this by somebody who has completely bad motives and is working for other people that want to make Idaho vulnerable. We'll talk about why this is more important in minutes. So let's talk about marijuana from an education point of view. Who finds it hard to talk to people about marijuana? If you just want to tell them it's bad, or anybody find it difficult to explain why it's a bad thing? Yeah, we all do. Could be relatives, could be our spouse, could be our kids. But in order to attack anything, any societal problem, I think it's important to start out with some fundamental truths that guide everything we do. And those include some of these. Frederick Douglass said, it's easier to build strong children than repair broken men or women or children. Is there anything we know that's not? That's a truth. Help people not be broken. It's way better than trying to fix them after the fact. Build strong children. It's easier to defend cities than to retake them. Once these states have lost the war, they will never recover the quality of life they once had. They will never recover it. They've lost that war. So we don't want to lose in the first place. And the last one, and a foundational truth that's kind of an inside joke for us, is that Idaho is an island of sanity in a sea of insanity. We're surrounded by states, and these liberal laws and policies have destroyed them. Anybody been to Portland lately, or San Francisco, or Seattle, or any of these places? It's like the episode of The Walking Dead. People don't want to go back there because they've just been destroyed. So when these other states, I like this idea for a campaign sometime. Idaho is not Colorado. Recreation in Idaho means this, not this. Those kind of messages. We don't want to be like those other states. So we have to have these discussions, but I believe we have to have them in a different way than we have been having them. And I'll explain why in a second. We have to do this because there are people that are targeting our state. This is one of the most odious humans on the planet. His name is Radical Russ Belvin. I can tell you lots of stories about him, but see him point to Idaho? He was the leader of the last initiative that failed. There's reasons for that, but he's a horrible person. He's a national figure in the pro-pot movement, owns a dispensary in Oregon. claims he is a refugee from the horrible state of Idaho, and he wants to make it a happy place for people to live again. He pretends he's all about sick people, but guess what? While he's pushing a medical pot bill, he also starts a recreational bill. What does that tell you about his real interest in sick people? Anyway, you get people like that, but it's hard to talk to people about it because one reason is people already have opinions about pot that's been developed over decades. They believe this is true. Many people believe things that are not true. They fervently believe things that are absolutely not true. To get them off of that belief, that knowledge, that opinion is very, very difficult because you're starting with a bias, an idea, a set of facts that they have. And to undo that is super hard. But then to move them from here to actually opposition is a tremendously difficult problem. That's where a lot of states are losing the battle. So I'm going to give you a way that I found to be the most productive, best way to engage people in the discussion about marijuana. That takes away all the barriers, a lot of the barriers. It's a way to approach people about this that it's hard for them to argue against, and it makes sense to most people. And the way I usually do this, and this could be a friend or a family member or neighbor, it could be a Kiwanis club, it could be anybody, is I first admit that this is a very complex problem. This is a very difficult problem. It's the thing about marijuana. What's going on? But I want to have a starting point to see if we can agree on a few things first. And what I asked them to do is to think about the words used by marijuana users to describe the state of being high in that culture. What words do they use to talk about how it affects their brains and bodies? Everybody's thinking of a bunch of words. Everybody knows. Here's some of them. Stoned, high-waisted, baked, fried, toasted, burnt, blazed, gone, faded, stupid, wrecked. And those are just the polite words. There's lots of other ways that I wouldn't say, and well, I wouldn't say at all, but I certainly wouldn't say to other people, that describes, and you know what? That's the point. The culture pushes that point. Do you think most pot users are thinking, this is going to make me smarter. This is going to make me into a Michelangelo. This is going to make me feel inspired. No, they want to be wrecked, stupid, stoned, wasted, and whatever it is. That's the point. That's why marijuana now is not sold as 4% THC you find at Woodstock. It's 98% THC in an edible, not an edible, but in concentrate in every pot store in America.
It was an exception though, because you remember when our kids testified in front of the legislators a few years ago? Casey Russ testified that he was only had like 125 IQ until he started smoking pot, and then he went to 160 something.
I remember that guy. Gary was sitting at their house. Yeah, he testified. Lifelong stoner came out. I'm Mensa. He said he was in Mensa and said he got smarter when he was smoking pot. And
Like by a huge amount.
huge amount. Now,
Like above like
Mario wasn't a legislator at that time, but I remember the people on the committee. Oh, there's a good. You know what? That hearing, most of the legislators on that committee were ready to vote for that bill long ago. And we had lined up all these experts, and then that's why they got a Mensa guy who's getting smarter, and it was crazy. And they still were voting until, was it 2 of your teenagers? 1 or 2 got up at the end, changed almost every single vote because of what a teenager said. It was awesome. How they looked those legislators in the eye and said, don't do this to us. This is our future you're talking about. We do not want this. And I tell you what, me getting up and saying the same thing, the effect of when that those teenagers got up and said that, it changed hearts and minds, and that bill failed because of one or two teenagers came all the way on a bus. Is that right? And slept on the gym floor the night before. It changed Idaho history. So you got them into this, and pretty much if they're truthful, they'll say, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. So then we have some to think about words that almost every person in the state otherwise values. And those words are things like excellent parents, quality education, safe highways, sound judgment, successful employment, respect for laws, safe communities, healthy kids and families. Is that not what every normal Idahoan wants for themselves, their families, their communities, state? No one really can argue with that. So what you've done here is you've established this is what this culture wants. This is the end product of this culture. This is what people want for their state. And then you ask them to compare those two lists to see if they're compatible. Even the most strident hot advocate has a hard time explaining how those two are compatible. They're not. And the thing you can do with this kind of argument is you could say, if you have more people in this category, you will have less of all of these. And the converse is true. The more you have of this, the less you have of this, or even the need for it when you have all of this. Now, in the end of that discussion, the question becomes, should laws, policies, and even constitution change in order to create more people in this state of mind? Is there any sense to that? Now, if you don't say anything more about than that, if they really think about that, that should help them understand why it is important to not let this happen. That's not the whole discussion, but it's a way to start a discussion where they really can't argue and make any sense. You start with common ground. You get them, you don't trap them, but you get them basically to think, wow, I never thought of it that way. So that's a very safe way to start that discussion. And from there you can go. But if they don't get this part, there's nothing you say that's going to change their mind. As that they're just beyond, they're impervious to facts or logic, is how I like to describe them. So how do we get legalization in states? There's a number of different ways. Who's behind it? Number one, pro-pot lobbying organizations. It all started with billionaires, 3 or 4 of them. George Soros, Peter Lewis, funded all the pro-pot campaigns at the beginning. They love pot. I can tell you lots of stories about that. Then they started organizations. They funded organizations like the Marijuana Policy Project, Drug Policy Alliance, NORML, and those. And then those lobbying organizations funded by those people started funding and starting all these campaigns. As the industry grew, we now have gone from groups like Marijuana Policy Project funding most of it. Now we got the commercial pot industry funding. So South Dakota, I was just trying to help them. They are one of the few states that followed a whole different way of attacking things. They didn't follow the normal advice that caused everybody to lose. And they had no campaign in South Dakota against the pot initiative 3 months before the election. There was no campaign. A group of people of great faith got the faith community together. And in 3 months, they formed an organization. They raised $500,000. They organized, got people out to vote, and they beat an initiative that was ahead of the polls 3 months earlier. They did it the right way. And I can tell you more about that. But you know who funded that entire South Dakota recreational pot campaign? The South Dakota Medical Cannabis Association was who funded recreational. Medical Cannabis Association, all the money that went into that. Another way we get it is pro-pot politicians, whether they admit it or not. You all have legislators of some sort that are sympathetic to or even supportive of pot, and you don't know it. Most of you. That's a whole different discussion. But on the national level, governors, legislators, senators, some people, if you watch their tweets, Blumenauer, some of the Cory Booker, it seems like they're just obsessed with legalizing pot at the federal level. They're just obsessed with that. So you got that. And then you've got entire governments that are pro-marijuana because they looked at the dollars. They're not caring about kids, they're not caring about stuff, they're looking at tax dollars or votes or campaign contributions. So what that gets down to is you've got these national organizations putting lots of money, and when they don't put money in it, they have campaign managers that come out and run campaigns. A guy named Matthew Schweck, who's like a vice president of Marijuana Policy Project, moved to South Dakota. So he has a house there so he can claim he's a South Dakotan running the campaign. He's an employee of the Marijuana Policy Project. These groups keep tremendous influence. And so if they don't provide the money, they still provide the brain strategy, how to win stuff. These guys are one of the worst. I haven't really had, I'm going to lose track. Hey, will you tell me when I got 30 minutes, 15?
Yep.
Because I'm going to run out of time.
Yep.
I sign up for these things with fake email addresses. This particular one was Herb. I thought that was funny. But they send me all their stuff as a result. And I got one years ago from Rob Campia. And he's saying to me in Idaho, MPP is a machine whereby you insert money in one end and policy change comes out the other end. You can't speak the machine today. Those are the people on the other side. They're very organized. Now you've got the pot industry. This is different. It's not the old stoners of the last thing, oh, we need to legalize weed. It's guys in suits. It's guys who can contribute to campaigns. It's guys who can afford lobbyists to come from Austin, Texas, and Washington, D.C. It's those guys. They have grown in power, wealth, and influence beyond anything imaginable in a very quick time. It's big tobacco on steroids, accelerated pace, using the same playbook, but going much quicker than before. And then as a result, you've got the new pot barons that are literally starting to control decisions. And then the pro-pot politicians come in several forms. Some of them just don't know. They lack insight. They're naive. They don't know, but it's not because they really looked into it. Then you've got some political ideology drives that. And in this case, it's a really weird situation where you have far left liberals joining far right conservatives in the middle. In Idaho, it's not Democrats who are going to make Idaho, they're going to try to get Idaho to legalize. It's far right people with an R in front of it. Because they don't agree on anything else. You think about Congress. What do they agree? They can't even agree on what day it is, Democrats and Republicans. But they join on the one issue that unites them, which is legalizing pot. It's the only thing they agree on. So it's a very odd situation that we have in Idaho. And if it ever passes in our legislators, it's going to be because of Republicans, not Democrats. Democrats don't have enough votes to do it. And that sometimes is motivated for lots of reasons: ideology, money, campaign contributions, or this idea that the state's going to have all this extra money to spend however they want. So these governments, entire governments, decide that they'll sacrifice public safety and health for tax revenue. And they get made all those kinds of promises. So if you ever want to read a good article on how this is politically corrupting America, this is a great article. Politico is not really a conservative magazine, but this is one of the most in-depth stories I've ever read about how money has caused massive political corruption in state, local, and federal governments. It's really good. So how does this happen? It's all because of money. They have lots of money, we do not. If we took everybody in this room representing all all places all around the state, and we pooled all of our excess money we got in the bank to do what you all do. How much money could we raise to fight a pot campaign, assuming that was something you all could do? Kendall, how much extra money could you contribute to the fight pot, assuming you didn't have the other reasons you can't? How much money could you put into that?
Oh, let's go, $11,000.
That's a pretty good start. Some of you zero, some of you 100, some of you 500. That's pretty good. But Kendall, let's say we can put together 20,000 versus $500,000, which is like a starting point for them. Some states, Ohio is 22 million that they spend. It's all about money. And with that money, they have very, very sophisticated people that put together these campaigns that use the same old stories. Keep it away from kids, get rid of the cartels. But they've evolved now. It's pot legalization will solve the opioid crisis. It will cure addictions. It will fix all of these medical problems so they don't need opioids. It'll get rid of cartels. But instead, the cartels ramping up synthetics as they are competing with the state. So that's the big thing. So this particular publication, which one is it? I can't go. Marijuana Business Daily, they have trade publications, even though it's all illegal in federal law. Every single thing every state's doing is all federal felonies. That's never changed. This Marijuana Business Daily, after the 2020 elections, is bragging marijuana legalization proponents outraised opponents, outraised opponents 36-1. Marco, you'll be elected for eternity in your district now. If your opponent had 36 times more money than you did for a campaign, how likely it is no one knew you'd win, how likely is it you would win 36-1 outspin? Who's going to hear your message when they've got all the money? That's what happens. So in just 4 states, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they've raised almost $20 million. Combined anti-pot was a little over $500,000. So the end result is, what do the voters hear? They only hear the reasons why they do it. They don't hear us. They don't hear us. These people are very sophisticated. I made this chart after going back and looking at campaign finance records from 1996 in all of these states. And what I could document in government paperwork is that from the beginning of legalization in California, which was medical in 1996, to now, the combined resources put into these states to legalize some form of pot is over $100 million in 8 Western states. Some of them we don't know, because Wyoming and Idaho, we've not. They spent money here, but not huge amounts. So that's the path to victory. And that's just up to 2020. There's millions and millions spent since. So after Oregon legalized pot, which made a disaster, they just legalized all drugs, because they spent $6.2 million. Convinced Oregons, who are already dumb from smoking too much weed, $6.2 million, and they passed that. And their brilliant idea was, if somebody got caught with some heroin or something like that, they'd get a card that had a number for a treatment center on it. They, instead of being a junkie, they're supposed to call this number to get help. Well, they only had to print like 10 of them. Nobody calls this number. It's a complete pipe dream. It's ridiculous public policy. And so now they have legalized every drug, and the drug rate's going. But I want you to look at this number, 6.2. Out of that $5 million, out of that 6.2, 5 million came from New York-based organization started by Soros. 5 million came not from Oregon. And any of you like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, his name's on the paperwork, donated $500,000 to legalize all drugs in Oregon. Do people know that? Do you think people in Oregon knew that a Washington DC, a New York-based lobbying firm and Mark Zuckerberg convinced them all this is a great idea? They did not know. They did not know. This just shows how much of the campaigns were financed by the industry. 99%, 99, 94, 86. The industry is funding this now. And why? More 3 minutes?
30 minutes.
Okay. The industry, why? More customers. What business wants to be happy with one Maverick store in the state? They do not. And what Maverick stores can tend to have 4 customers versus 1,000. It's just business. These people want more customers, and the ones that the states just have medical want recreational because it opens the door. Because if people aren't smart enough to get enough to get a medical marijuana card, which means they're not very smart, now they'll be able to get it for no reason. So all of this is so. What's the threats to Idaho? Legislature and voter initiatives. I used to think we were safe. Well, years ago we were not safe because the legislature was entertaining bills all the time that looked like we were on the edge. And it was kind of scary. And then we got people who stood up and said, nope, no way, we're not doing this ever. But now the pendulum's swinging back. These pro-pot people are moving their way, and it's very sophisticated, and it takes too long to explain, and it's not probably appropriate this meeting. They are replacing good, solid, conservative legislators who hate the idea of legalization but never vote for it, and they're replacing them with these stealth candidates that nobody knows is being backed by multi-million-dollar organizations in Texas, Virginia, other places. The lobbyists for the Austin organization, an organization that does not exist here, and their lobbyists spent 4 times more money lobbying in our legislature this year than any other lobbyist. Austin, Texas. What's that tell you? They backed, this same group backed more Republican primary candidates in Idaho than any other state in America. And this group has a survey you have to fill out to be backed by them. Survey asking your position on legalizing. So to get their endorsement, you got to say this, and this. One of the major questions is, do you support legalization? Nobody knows this. Only a few, not enough. That's something for another discussion. So voter initiatives, we have one going on right now. It's the Idaho Medical Marijuana Act. Instead of being run by this guy who is, I think if you saw Satan, that would be him. He's a very bad person, but these groups are all reporting it. And Kind Idaho is the main group. He's kind of out of it. He got people so bad, he's kind of kicked out for now. Here's one of their Facebook posts. I don't drink because every time I drink, I realize why I'm a pothead instead. Now, these are the medicine people. So those are the ones promoting it. If the thing they have was not written by Kind Idaho. The thing they have was written by lobbyists and the pot industry to have things in it that will make it a nightmare for Idaho. They did not write it. It did not come out of their brain. And so we have this, and in Idaho, they're going to have that medical patients have about 4 ounces at a time. 4 ounces is a lot of dope. You have to smoke about 9 joints a day, every day, the rest of your life to need this. But if you smoke a 1/4 pound in a day, you can go get another 1/4 pound. That's what this initiative says. So that's a lot and a lot of dope. It allows people to grow marijuana plants in their homes. And you can't do anything about it. Up to 6 plants. Those of you who know about marijuana plants, you can grow one this tall, creates pounds and pounds and pounds of dope. And there's cycles. So you can go through a little cycle and get pounds and another. And it's more dope than any one human could ever use. So guess what happened? More dope than they can use. Where's it go? Goes out the door. Goes into the black market. What that means, if that passes, we're gonna have pot dispensaries in every part of the state. Pot's gonna be grown in neighborhoods. It's gonna hurt all kinds of things, highway safety, crime, increased marijuana use, all of those things. That's gonna be the consequence. So let me give you a couple ideas on how I believe Idaho continue to be safe from this. It's not the conventional way to do it. This is counterintuitive to many people in prevention because we've always done it this way. The way we've always done this, talk to people about bad marijuana. Oh, marijuana does this and this and makes you crazy, gives you testicular cancer and blah, blah, blah. And it's not medicine, but there's a lineup of people over here that says it cured my grandma's cancer, it made me smarter. All of that stuff, everything's better with pot. And everyone will be crying and sad or angry. If the legislators, if you don't pass this. And so the experts on the other side, it says, no, that's not true. Even doctors, they don't listen to these guys because I've got all these crying, sad people over here. If we try to educate people just on the harms of marijuana, we have to do that. But if that's our strategy, we're going to lose. Like I said before, people know things that are untrue. And to get them off of that, the neutral position, and then to be opposed to it is an almost impossible task. And that's especially true because of the number of people we can reach. You have to scale up drug prevention, drug education to a massive level to make enough difference to change election. We don't have the money or the political will to do that. We don't know how to do that. No state really does it well. So if your focus is only on bad marijuana, it's not medicine. My opinion is we're going to lose. Still have to do it, but that's not the strategy. Here's a strategy that I know works. And one part of that strategy is instead of talking about marijuana is bad, marijuana is not medicine, we talk about the grim realities of legalization itself. We get, because when you are arguing somebody about whether marijuana is or medicine, you're fighting on their turf. It's a turf they understand very well. And their turf is all about emotion and anecdotal stories. I once watched two doctors who were on the faculty of a major university medical school, highly regarded doctors, debate two potheads on the news show for half an hour. On the biggest news station in the state here. The doctors got trashed because when one of the potheads said it cured my diabetes or cancer or whatever, what's the doctor supposed to say in a half-hour debate? No, it didn't. No, they can't say that. The answer to that, it cured cancer, is 3 hours of medical studies and all of this stuff. You can't do it in a soundbite. So it cured cancer. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work. So these people destroyed these two medical doctors because these doctors are fighting on their turf. Now, if you flip that around and think about not the drug, but the grim realities of legalization, what does the normalization of drugs do to us? There is a mountain of evidence that is much more persuasive than just talking about marijuana. Increased drug use among youth. That's one of their biggest lies. This comes from an NSDUH survey every year. We try to make one of these, haven't done it this year. It shows all the states that legalize. The red states are recreational, green states are medical. And it shows rankings of use in 3 age categories, 12, 17, 18, 25, 26 plus. You'll see where the use rate's the highest in recreational states, not in every case, but it's partly because some of these states are explained in ways that would take too long to explain. Idaho's right here, here. But Oregon, Washington, Colorado, all the states around us. So in Idaho, 5.9% youth rate, that's a regular use, as they describe it. versus 12.8% in Vermont, Oregon, 10, a lot higher age categories. Look at this, 18%, 18 to 25, 40% almost in up there. It looked like there's a connection. Sure there is. State sanction. How many of you know some good things that health and welfare does for kids and other people in the state? They spend a lot of money. Did they get a lot of money?
$5 billion.
5 billion. And do they have a lot of employees?
Yeah.
And they have lots of regulations. They have lots to do. This law passes, health and welfare will be in charge of the entire state POP program. And they will do very little else.
That or they made tax tuition.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's tax commission, sometimes the state pharmacy board. In this case, it's mostly health and welfare. Will be running, they'll be in charge of manufacturing, distribution, dispensaries, getting parts, regulation, enforcement. All of that. So whatever they're doing now for your kids, much of their attention is going to be spent on it. And yet I've been in states where when presented with this problem, instead of health and welfare objecting and saying, we can't do this, we've got too many other important things, we don't want to run a state program. You know what they do instead? I've watched them. They start figuring out how much more money they're going to get, how much more office space, how much more equipment, how many more employees. It's a kingdom building thing. Don't think we're not immune to that, not health and welfare, but government agencies in general. They're going to run all of this, and they're going to do it under the disguise of medicine. They're going to say, they're going to sanction the sale of a crude street drug with unknown things in it, with unknown and unknowable consequences. They're going to say, call it marijuana. And if you want to really educate people about marijuana, show them what's inside a medical marijuana dispensary. Help them understand that when you go in there, there's not a pharmacist in a white coat, medical training. There's bud tenders selling super diesel, white widow, blue dream, mango, super jack. That's out there in mason jars. That's medicine. And with various kinds of potencies. Marijuana plants huge amounts of THC, these little crystals. That's where most of it comes from, but they concentrate it. That's what would be 80–90%. It's like the frozen TV dinner of weed. Big cards. That's what's happening. So the THC at Woodstock, 3 to 4%, got everybody high, is now true OG, gelato, Jack Herrera. Jack is like one of the famous founders of hot kosher kush. And it's all, and you know what? I don't know if I have a slide for this. Oh yeah. And depending on the dispensary, a gram of kosher kush, $140. The day I checked this, the spot price of gold was $61. So that stuff is twice as valuable as gold. That helps you understand why people are trying so hard to make it legal. You will get rich selling this, something that's more valuable than gold. That's why somebody will spend $6 million in Idaho to get dispensaries here. Do you think anybody knows that? Most of our prevention people don't know that, let alone people in the field, let alone legislators. So there are your bud tenders. I don't know, no medical degree. So let me tell you 2 quick stories about bud tenders. I was in Denver, and we took a law enforcement tour of one of the biggest pot dispensaries grow operations in Denver. Long story, but it was like, oh my goodness, this thing going on. And in the front of the store, there's a medical side and there's a recreational side. You come in the front door, you just go over here, you go over there. And as we're standing there, we got cops there being given the tour proudly. And over here, I see the bud tenders on the medical side. I'm kind of watching them. And this dude came in, he's young, maybe mid-20s, walks in, doesn't look sick, doesn't have a cane, wheelchair, anything, walks up to the counter, says, I want a pound of this. This got my attention because they can't buy a pound in Denver. You can't do it. And the lady says, well, okay, it's going to be this amount. He goes, no, I talked to Joe and he said I could get it for the, and I watched them have an argument over the price for a pound. And at one point I got ahead of myself. Oh, these are pictures from Nevada. See these sick young men here lined up to get their medical marijuana card? It's very sad. In Denver, they advertise medical marijuana. We can't promise doctor approval, but we offer a money back guarantee if denied. As I tell you, you're going to get a card. Okay. Dr. Sona Patel advertises her medical marijuana practice this way, which is odd, but more odd is that's Dr. Patel. That look like a serious medical person to you? Okay, I gotta go back. In this dispensary, what's this deal? I watched them argue over the price for a pound, and then they wrapped up a pound. He pulled out a wad of hundreds, counted out $2,100, gave them, and took it out the door. I was having some serious medical problems at the time. They thought I had early onset Parkinson's, which a lot of people might observe when you see me hiking, especially, but it didn't turn out to be true. But it was kind of scary at the time. So my cop friends are over here. I go over to the same lady and very quietly says, I think I have, the doctor said I have early onset. Says, what can you do? Grabbed a book, big book, right to the P's, went down. She says, oh, you need that over there. Major, serious medical problem. She got that out of a book. Place in Las Vegas did the same thing. This guy, I told him this, his eyes got big like this. He didn't know what to do. He came out from around the glass counter, started going around the dispensary, going like this. And I go, oh yeah, you need that right there. Parkinson's. It's a joke. It's a joke. So here's some black market realities. A lot of this is in writing. A lot of this could be sent to you. Rise of national cartels, destruction of public lands, heavy use of banned pesticides. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. These are nerve agents. These are banned pesticides in the US. They're so dangerous, they spray them all over the plants. Every single outdoor grow sprays this stuff all over the plants. It gets on the leaves, inside the plants, goes in the soil, water, destroys the environment. It's a nerve agent that people are then smoking. So if you don't think about pot, THC, they are smoking pesticides into their brains and bodies. Environmental damage. I've been in these grows. I might have some pictures of poisoning wildlife. This is huge. Narco slavery, human trafficking. A lot of these people being brought across the border are put enslaved in marijuana grows in many states to pay off their debt, and they can't leave. Water diversion and theft, threats to the public. This is just up foothills in Boise. All these places from a helicopter, those are all marijuana plants. You get on the ground, that's what our national forest looks like. And guns everywhere, because every single one of these are guarded by people with guns. This is a grow I went into in California recently with a guy named Murad Gabriel, who is the chief environmental officer for the Forest Service nationwide. He's testing the pesticides, environmental damage in these places. Carbofuran is one of the main, and it just literally is a poison, a nerve agent. So even pot that's going through the back door and sold legally in the front door of a dispensary, it's got these pesticides in it. And that's what they leave in the environment. So, and I already talked to you about the opioid epidemic. So culturally, we have to think about the grim realities, and that includes the normalization of drug use. The idea that this is recreation versus all of this. And that's a whole different argument about what it's doing to us culturally. And one of the things you could do in terms of helping parents, policymakers understand is the cultural influence. Just show them what our kids and other people are faced with every day. They're inundated by it. I have thousands of these examples from social media. The message is, this is cool, this is safe, this is medicine, we're gonna have a good time, my blood type is THC, and you get back to the old thing about tobacco smoke kills you, but marijuana heals you. And it's no wonder the kids don't care. So in 2021, a representative from Northern Idaho introduced the pot bill. This is the last one. He introduced it by sending an email to all of his colleagues about the Idaho medical cannabis bill. Then the headline was 3 bong hits today at 3. What's that tell you about his concern for medicine? It was just a big joke to him. Thankfully, it died in committee without a hearing, and that's a miraculous, wonderful story. But then Senator Scott Grow last year, awesome guy, he's like Marco. He introduced a constitutional amendment that would ban legalization in Idaho. It passed by a 2/3 majority in the Senate, because you have to get 2/3 to get it for a constitutional amendment. In the House, it was opposed by a particular group that it scored on. And if you get a certain score, you're a good legislator, and if you don't, you're a bad legislator, and they will promote this suddenly. Well, guess what? Even though this group claimed they would not oppose it, it lost in the House by 5 votes, all by people who adhere to the idea that this group votes legalization. Because of freedom. That 2/3 of the House, 60%, 2/3 Senate, 60% in the House, it lost because of those stealth pro-pot people. People don't know for the most part. 5 votes. And this is by a group who claims they advocate for less government bureaucracy, think health and welfare, lower taxes. Guess what happens when more people smoke dope? Do we have less cost to society or more? Removing special interests, it's all coming from out of state, more freedom, all of those kind of things, and it creates a huge bureaucracy. So as a result of Governor, Senator Grow, Marco, others, strong messages, it's not going to happen here ever, even though that particular bill didn't pass. Huge messages that we're not going to put up with this in Idaho. Look what the pot publications have said. This is their word. It would make the guy who, what's his name, Russ Belville. The reason they wanted to pass this amendment is they wanted to, it would make it impossible to ever run a marijuana initiative or legalization initiative for even things like medical science, psilocybin, or other drugs. He says that's why Senator Grow and others wanted to pass that bill. It would stop us from legalizing pot and other things. And you know what? That resulted in Idaho being identified by the national pot industry as the most hostile state in America for legalization. And you know what? That's made all the difference, because they see Idaho as a bad investment. They don't want to come and spend money if they're going to get beat. So those messages that we send out nationally have protected Idaho more than any other thing we could do. If our leaders start to change that tone and they start to think about, well, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do this little thing, and we'll do this, then all hell will break loose. Yeah, give them an inch, take them out. Okay. There's 3 things people need to know about the initiative. The candidate, which is the initiative itself. That's the thing on the ballot. That bill is a nightmare. You need an analysis of it, we have it, but it has nightmarish things in it. People need to know what's in it. You can't let them talk about it's medicine, it's not medicine. That's their turf. You have to talk about this 32-page bill they created that's full of nightmare stuff. You have to talk about the messengers. Who's behind it? Is it really the Kiwanis Club from Melba, Idaho that's pushing this? Is it a group of soccer moms? Is it a group of Republican women of Canyon County? No, it's National Pot Organization, the politicians. And finally, you got to talk about the grim realities. Those 3 things, if you educate people on those 3 things, they will reject the candidate and the messengers and the realities. But you can't fight on their turf. We fight on their turf, we're going to lose. If we make the pot industry think we are vulnerable, we have to not fight on their turf. So what's our future? What's this little guy's world going to be like? Is his world going to be have to walk past the pot dispensary on the way to school? Is his life going to be mom and dad getting stoned because they have headaches or sore leg? Is it going to be drugs all over, the normalization of drugs? Or hers? What's it going to be? We really have to decide whether this is our future. We have to decide whether Idaho's worth saving, whether Idaho is, unlike any other state in America, equipped to fight these people and win, to be a beacon of light, a city on a hill, to show others how we can win and continue to win and not give up. Because if we lose, no one's going to win. If we can't stop them here, it's over. We have the tools, the people, the kind of people, leaders that can stop it. Right now, the threat of the initiative is not real high because the people in charge is here are not that organized. But the minute somebody from DC steps in to run a campaign, brings in the money to gather signatures, we could. So we have to be, even though it's not hot right now, we have to be strong in messaging. Everybody from the governor on down needs to be saying no way, no how, not here, not ever. That's the message that's going on. And for those of you that you kind of cringe because it's counterintuitive to think, well, we just need to teach about marijuana. I understand all that, but that's not how we do it. So however you do that in your drug education, your coalitions, in your positions that don't allow you to be political, just think about education being about things like the environment and all of those things that you have to start getting that message out. We have lots of tools, lots of stuff that's written, all by volunteers, people that never took their job to worry about these things. But and good legislators that back us up, and all of you good people. And Idaho's worth fighting for, and God bless all of you for what you do every day in Idaho and for America. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Thank you.